Let's talk about one of my favourite characters from the Star Wars books, Grand Admiral Thrawn. G'day to all you lovely people and welcome back to my channel. I'm Kathy and today I wanted to talk about the Thrawn series by Timothy Zahn, which is quite different to the Thrawn trilogy, the first books that Zahn wrote in the Star Wars universe, which introduced Thrawn. This series was written in the last 10 or so years, I think. I can't recall the dates, but I'll put it in my description box below. And there are 3 books in this series. There is Thrawn, there is Alliances, and Treason is the 3rd. Before I get started with the review, there are a few preliminary points that I need to make. First is that whilst I have read some other Star Wars books that came out in the 90s, I have not read anything else but Zahn's books. Nor have I seen the TV show Star Wars Rebels, an animated show. I'm not sure yet if I'm going to watch it. I haven't decided. So I went into this series knowing nothing about the background of it. Something else you also need to be aware of is that I love the character of Thrawn. From the very first time he was introduced in Heir to the Empire, I thought he was such a fascinating and nuanced character. He did not come across as a villain. He came across as somebody with a different perspective to our heroes. It didn't seem that he was just bent on, say, destruction or vengeance, but rather that he believed the world would be better with an empire in place. And I think that's what drew me to him. I thought, he's not your typical very black villain. He is definitely much more grey. He also has a moral sense, a sense of honour that some villains simply don't have. I only recently found out about this series because I hadn't been reading all that much, and I was really keen to read it as I wanted to know more about his history, Thrawn's history I mean. I wanted to know what his life was like with the Chiss, which is his species. And I was so pleased when I saw there was 2 trilogies based on his character. And when I started the first book in this series called Thrawn, I expected it to be his backstory. I expected it to be about his time with the Chiss. And instead, this book is based on his rise through the Empire, with Emperor Palpatine at its head. I found that a little disappointing, actually. I was so keen to learn more about the Chiss and the kind of people that his species are, and instead we were in the Empire watching Thrawn's rise through the ranks. However, I have now learnt that the next trilogy, which I think is called Ascendancy, is about the Chiss, so I'm very much looking forward to reading that. Unfortunately, my disappointment did spill over onto the book, which covers a very large span of time. We see his meteoric rise through the ranks in the Empire, from, I think he was a lieutenant who had to go to an academy, to then becoming a Grand Admiral. Concurrently, we also see the development and rise of another character called Price, a young, very ambitious woman from a backwater planet who comes to Coruscant, the capital, looking to succeed in politics. To me, who had not seen the show or knew anything about the backstory behind why this book came into being, the introduction of a character seemed a little jarring. I wasn't expecting it. I expected maybe to see somebody I knew or somebody who was more closely related to Thrawn in some way. And whilst they did interact throughout the book, she was not a pleasant character. In fact, if anything, she epitomizes everything I despise in politics, or politicians, I should say. Her ambition and tactics in attaining power, I don't think is meant to make you like her. She is not a likable person, in my opinion, and quite often I would be bored reading about her as I wanted to know more about Thrawn, especially as this book was called Thrawn. I expected it to be mainly about him, about learning about who he was, the kind of person he was. Perhaps because it did span such a large amount of time, I felt that we didn't get to understand Thrawn as well as we should have. At times I felt his rise through the ranks was a little too quick and not always justified. I think Zahn was trying to say that sometimes it was all about the politics and not about Thrawn himself, but I wanted to know more about Thrawn, the inner workings of his mind, what motivated him. I'm still a little unclear exactly why he decided to join the Empire, given his ties to the Chiss. To me, that seemed weak motivation, personally anyway. Another character that was introduced was Eli Vanto. I actually really liked this character. He was also from a backwater planet who was forced into the position of translating for Thrawn and eventually becoming his aide, which meant he didn't advance as rapidly as he should have through the military. He was a very good foil for Thrawn, as well as being a sounding board. But I also got the impression, which was later confirmed, that Thrawn had reasons for fostering the relationship with Vanto. Something strange that does happen in the first book, right at the end, did surprise me, and I'm still not clear why it happened regarding Eli Vanto, and that's all I'm going to say on that. But his perspective of Thrawn added something, I think, to the novel. It helped me understand Thrawn a bit better. Something else I really liked, however, was that each chapter is headed by either, I think, a journal or Thrawn's thoughts on being a warrior or tactics or strategy. I really loved those, actually. It helped me understand him better as well. Though, as I said, I would have liked a little bit more insight into the inner workings of his mind. Something I didn't like about the book, however, was that we are often told how much of a genius he is. I think sometimes authors are keen to stress a particular point about a character and they can become heavy-handed. That felt a little heavy-handed to me. I would have preferred just to see his actions and decide for myself whether that was genius or not. And in addition to being told repeatedly how much of a genius Thrawn was, we were often told that he could not maneuver his way through politics, that he was really quite naive in relation to politics. Now that I found really annoying because we were told over and over and over again. I think it was repeated far too often and I didn't always agree. Yeah, sometimes I thought, no, I think he's just biding his time. I don't think somebody who is as intelligent as Thrawn couldn't see through some of these machinations going on around him or even involving him. I think he was just taking his own path regardless of what the politics were. But we are told so often that you have to wonder, is it true or is it just what other people's perceptions of Thrawn are? However, because I have read the original trilogy, I recall that Thrawn was actually, I think, exiled because he did not maneuver the politics so well in Coruscant. I just feel it wasn't necessary to stress it so often. And that is one criticism I have, as well as not enough inner workings of Thrawn's mind. Something, however, I really did like about the book was that I sometimes forgot that they are the enemy. That this is the Empire we're talking about that we all hated in the Star Wars films, or should have hated anyway. You sometimes forgot about that. you kind of felt like, oh no, Thrawn's the good guy and anyone who opposed him is the bad guys. So I had to remind myself, no, hang on, we're talking about this very oppressive regime, the Empire, and their actions are usually quite ruthless in suppressing any protests. And I actually liked that Zahn was able to make me forget occasionally that we're talking about the evil galactic empire rather than about the rebels who I've always loved. Something else I didn't really love about this book is that its plot seemed almost secondary to the story, or Thrawn's and Price's rise over the years. We are told that Thrawn is searching for this rebel, I guess, or someone who's causing grief in the Empire called Night Swan. I found that whole storyline quite weakly drawn, not believable nor exciting. It was very easy to guess who Night Swan was, and I had so many ideas about it would be so much better if it was this person or that person rather than who it ended up being. It was a little too predictable and just not exciting, whereas Zahn is really good, I think, at plots, generally. I was disappointed in the plot in the first book. Overall, I have to say the first was not my favourite. I had a lot of issues with it, and whilst I liked parts of it, I was dissatisfied at the end. I didn't hate the book, but I certainly didn't love it. And if I scored it out of 10, I think I would give it a 5.5. Only because I do like Zahn's writing and I love the character of Thrawn. The next book, Alliances, has a picture of Darth Vader on it. And in fact, Thrawn and Vader have to work together investigating a disturbance in the Force that the Emperor Palpatine has felt. Now this one I thought is going to be fantastic, and I really did enjoy this one because it was more contemporaneous. It didn't cover a large span of time, though there were 2 timelines, because apparently Thrawn had already met Anakin Skywalker. Okay, I have to confess, every time I think of Anakin Skywalker, I think of Hayden Christensen, who I think did a terrible job capturing this character. Partly because I think the films were really bad, but also partly because he was always so sulky, he made it hard for me to take him seriously. And unfortunately, that spilled over, I found, on the book. He annoyed me sometimes. I just thought, oh my God, he's just a brat and he's just pouting all the time. And I had to kind of force myself to put aside my dislike of the actor's portrayal and try to just read it like a new character. I didn't always succeed, and quite often I would get very annoyed with his thought processes or anything like that. However, that isn't to say that Zahn didn't capture him. I just found him annoying. I did, however, really like that there were 2 timelines. And of course, I was really happy to see Vader because we haven't seen any other characters from the original films. Now, Vader and Thrawn's relationship was very tense on occasion. Obviously, 2 very powerful men, both intelligent, vying for position sometimes. On occasion, it felt to me a little forced, some of the conflicts that arose. Though overall, I found it interesting to see how they dealt with each other. The one thing I will say that I was a little disappointed in was that I felt Zahn's portrayal of Vader was a little safe. He didn't really delve too much into this character, and I would have liked a little bit more, considering he is a major part of this book, just as Thrawn is. Ultimately, though, I really enjoyed seeing Thrawn interacting with Vader. I believe it showed me another aspect of his character, that he is smart enough to know when to back off. He is smart enough not to necessarily be manipulative as much as know how to deal with somebody who seems to have a trigger temper, I guess. I also liked the plot in this and what the mystery was, which I'm not going to spoil for you guys. I definitely enjoyed this one much more than I enjoyed the first book. Maybe because I felt I understand Thrawn a bit more. I could see why he behaved a certain way, that he believed what he was doing, being part of the Empire, was bringing order to the Empire. And that the rebels were simply going to create chaos, which was anathema to him. As for scoring alliances, I would give this one 6 to 6.5 out of 10. It was definitely a step above the first one, I believe. Treason, the last one. It's been several weeks now since I read Treason. There was a lot going on in this one. It reminded me the most of the first trilogy that Zahn wrote. There was so much going on. It was hard sometimes to put all the pieces together, but that's what made it so interesting and one I couldn't stop reading. Though sometimes it also felt a bit of a mess. There seemed to be too much going on and not enough concentrating on one aspect. It also left the book a little open-ended, though of course we know what happens, right? With Thrawn, if you've read the original trilogy, you definitely know what happens. However, I can see that there is room for more, which is why I'm keen to read the next books. When I first saw the title and read the blurb, I thought, oh, is this going to be the one where Thrawn loses the trust of the Emperor and is exiled? I'm not going to tell you if it was or it isn't. All I'm going to say is that it involves a lot of politics. Sometimes this book felt like there was too much going on, but it was also much more fast-paced, I think, even than the second one, and much more fast-paced than the first one. This one was interesting. It had a lot of elements to it. It involved even a little bit of the chess, and that's all I'm going to say. And we also got to see a little bit more about Thrawn and how he fosters, for example, his staff to improve. He is no Vader who kills off anyone who disappoints him. Though that's not to say that Thrawn can't be ruthless, but he always has a strategy as to why he's doing something. I'd say out of all of them, however, this one was more well plotted, and I really enjoyed that part of it. Wasn't always predictable, and that's what I liked about it. I also liked how it showed how Thrawn dealt with betrayal, and that's all I am going to say on that. Also, we met another character from the original trilogy, Pelion. Pelion? I can never pronounce his name. I was actually glad to see him because he is another very memorable character from the original series, or original trilogy, I should say. Overall, I would score this book at 6.5 to 7. And for the entire series, I think I would give it a 6.5. It isn't one of my favorites, though I did very much enjoy it. I just think that in some things it was a little lacking. I still don't feel I fully understand Thrawn, and that's what I was hoping for. I wanted to understand him better, and I don't feel I did. I should point out I'm a very tough scorer. No doubts about it. 6.5 to 7 is a good score for me. However, I cannot say that I loved this series as much as I did the original trilogy. I just adored that. I thought it was so well done. Maybe I also loved that series more because it had some of my favorite characters from the films, whereas these books don't. Nevertheless, these are, I think, good, but they are not as great as the original trilogy, not in my opinion. As someone who's always loved the character of Thrawn, I was really pleased to see that Zahn has written more on him, and I cannot wait to read the next series. I really hope that it will give me even more insight into the character. And now, of course, I'm going to ask you lot if you have read the Thrawn series and what your thoughts are on it. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Do you think I was too tough or too easy on the books? And you can let me know down in the comments, or you can contact me on Instagram. Thank you all so very much for watching. I truly appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, then you can do the usual. You can like, comment and subscribe if you haven't already, as it helps my channel to grow. I hope you all have a beautiful day, and I will see you next time. Bye.